Alright, so at this point I am going ahead and taking my third base because I've won that battle and I have a sizable advantage. So I feel safe. I put down a forge. Usually around the time you get your third base is a good time to get your forge so you can start getting upgrades, because upgrades are useful, particularly in a mirror matchup like this. It just enables your Zealots to kill the other guy's Zealots and Dragoons in less hits. So that's a big advantage. And as you can see, I'm teching away from Reavers and teching into Citadel and Templar Archives for High Templars and Archons. Archons are nice if they're really heavy with Zealots, because Archons do some splash damage, so they tear through melee units. And Templars are absolutely amazing, High Templars, because of their Psionic Storm, which basically just, it puts out this storm that does 80 damage over a period of time, and it just does massive damage, because it's pretty quick. It's like 80 damage over like a second or something. So it just does a ton of damage and adds massive amounts of DPS to your army. So, and the reason you switch away from Reavers, like, you don't keep making Reavers in PvP, because, I mean, just as you saw from that one battle, just one Reaver with the shuttle was pretty micro-intensive. There's like no way I could handle 3 shuttles, so your Reavers would just get sniped really easily. And plus, once Storm enters the battle, they just storm your Reavers, and because they're so slow, it's pretty hard to get them away, and they just die. So you end up losing battles really, really easily. So the typical thing is to open Goon Reaver, because it's strong in the early game, and then switch your tech, and around the time you're getting your third, or getting ready to take your third, start adding your Citadel and teching towards High Templar and Storm. And my plan is pretty much just to attack here once I get Storm. I'm pretty far ahead, so at this point, like, if you're really far ahead, if you're smart about your attacking, and you have the better economy, you can just keep attacking and whittling down their army, and since you have more resources and more gateways and stuff, you can max faster than they can, and you can just whittle them down. You just have to make sure you don't fight stupid battles. And let's see, lost my train of thought there for a sec. So I've got my third base, and I know I'm really far ahead, especially once I go down here. I'm going to go down to the bottom and make sure Protoss hasn't taken a third, and if they haven't, I'm pretty safe to take a fourth just because I'm so far ahead in economy. And you can see I'm just moving my army. Notice that I always move my army around with a move or attack move. You don't want to move your army around in general on regular move, because then if they run into the other army, they'll just try to run through it without fighting, and they'll get terribly hurt, and you'll like lose half your army before you even notice what's going on. So you usually want to move your army on attack move, so if your army runs into something else, they go ahead and attack. Now, I'm attacking here, so what you'll see is Zealots are kind of in front, and then the main thing I'm focused on here is just casting storms. I try to storm their incoming Zealots, and then I'll go ahead and storm their Goon lines. So you just throw down the storms, and that's doing just tons of damage, just letting my army rip through theirs. And the most important thing to realize is that watching the battle is secondary. Micro is secondary to macro. Micro is controlling your units and fighting battles, and macro is making stuff. And macro is way more important, because let's say you have a battle of 10 Dragoons versus 10 Dragoons, and the one guy goes ahead and micros the battle, and the other guy goes back and macros. The guy that micros the battle is going to win the battle probably. He might even have, like if it's a 10 Goon versus 10 Goon fight, he might win with 2 or 3 Goons left over, which is nice. But the guy that macroed, you know, he went back to all his gateways and made more Goons, so he's got 6 more reinforcement Dragoons on the way. So the micro guy, he's got 2 left, but he didn't make anything. So now all of a sudden, he's got 6 units to 2, so if the macro, or the guy that didn't do any microing, just comes down and reinforces with his Goons, he's going to win the next battle, because it was 10 on 10, but now it's 6 on 2. And I don't care how good your micro is, you can't win 6 on 2 if it's like a Dragoon versus Dragoon fight. It's just not going to happen. So in almost all situations, macro is more important than micro. It's really easy to do, to get in the habit of overwatching your battles, but try not to do that. You have to keep your money low in this game. I mean, as an example, imagine that you have you macro well, so you have no minerals left over, but let's say your opponent doesn't macro as well, and he has 1k minerals left over. What this means, let's say it's Protoss versus Protoss mirror matchup, is your opponent could have 10 more Zealots than you, because the Zealot's 100 minerals. So, you know, a typical army at the biggest has maybe 50 units in it, so that means his army is 20% larger. There's almost no way to overcome that difference in army size, which means you're guaranteed to lose the battle because he spent that money. So, you know, the general rule is that if you can, you want your money below 500, and anything above 1,000 is considered really bad. You never want to let your money get that high. The one exception to it is if you start to get maxed, like get to 200, obviously you can't spend your money. So usually what you do in that point is you start attacking so that you can spend your money. You look for things to attack. Don't be stupid about it, but look for places to attack, and then you can just keep adding gateways. Like you might have 8 or 9 normally, but once you start to get maxed and have money, you can add and go to like 12 to 15 gateways, so that when you do fight a battle and do free up supply, you can instantly remake your army and instantly spend all that money. And alright, so this Protoss gets carriers. I don't even know why. Carriers are really bad for the most part. The only time they sort of work is Protoss versus Terran, if you take your opponent by surprise, or if you have a huge economic lead. And you can see right there with these Templars, I'm merging them into Archons. That's a good thing to do, is use your Templars for a Psionic Storm, and then when they run out of energy, make them into Archons. Because usually you want a few Archons, because if you don't have any Archons and you're just using, you know, Zealot, Goon, Templar, the other guy will just make a bunch of Zealots, and since speed Zealots generally beat Dragoons, you'll kind of end up losing the battle, but if you have a few Archons, you can't do that. And as you can see, you know, I just keep macroing and reinforcing, and he's going to die, obviously, at this point. But, yeah, I can't emphasize enough how important macro is. It's the defining factor in this game, you know. And macro is more than just keeping your money low. That's a big part of it. Macro is also having good worker production. You know, the general rule is if you don't know when to stop making workers, you should continue to make workers. Unless you definitively know, I need to cut workers here, this is why, then don't ever stop making them.